Hi, my name is Anne Megerle, and I help clients take their first leap over the retirement cliff.
Hey there. Welcome to the Redirect Podcast. This is where we dive into real conversations, share stories, and just hang out talking about finding our purpose in retirement. Glad you're along for the ride, and let's get into it. Curt, Dale, today here we are again in the studio, the Redirect Podcast, talking about the very common part of the pre-retirement stage, finances. It's not a core component of our standard product offering, but it's important to discuss. It's an important part of getting ready for your next 30 and what's next in your life. So I got a couple questions to kick us off. Have you ever procured the services of some kind of wealth management provider?
Yes, I've done it. I think about it as when I got out of college, I did the first adult thing and got a life insurance policy. It was a whole life insurance policy, and I was going to do that because it had savings components to it, and that was the adult thing to do, was to buy that life insurance policy. And
not bad for 7 years old.
Not bad at all. And then, right after caddying, I had to do something with all that caddying money I was getting. But then moved into actually, and the way I've pretty much run my life is a good friend recommended a fund manager who's just managing a big fund, and I started putting my money into a fund that was pretty focused in the tech world. That was the 80s and the 90s, which was a good time to do it, but of course it blew up the late 90s. And then was able to find, and based on another recommendation, a friend of mine, when I moved into, a wealth management firm that took everything in a more holistic look at everything that I was going to do, with the first time a focus on, hey, you want to be putting money here, and someday you're going to retire, and that's when it all really, for finances, came to life for me.
How about you, Curt?
Well, it was 40 years ago. I was fortunate enough to marry a wonderful woman that when we first got married, she got a job out in the Philadelphia area working with a group that was a financial group. She was doing sort of sales support materials, working on Apple as Apple was just coming on out with their programs and such. And as a result of those conversations with the people she worked with, we learned about insurances. We learned about putting money away for the future. We had a conversation. I remember our oldest son, Ryan, was just born. We sat down with one of their people, and they're like, you need to put X amount of money away every month. And I'm like, why? Well, projection says that college is going to cost about $125,000. And I looked at him as a guy that had paid $16,000 for 4 years of school, saying, no way.
Get out
Guess
of
what?
here.
Right on. Right. So from that, I learned through that support, we got to start doing something with my money. That's something that my parents didn't do. 401k, investments, no, that wasn't in our world. So I learned from that, and I was fortunate. So every time I jumped into a company world, we got, 401k, did the matching thing, connected with a financial advisor back then. Mm-hmm. And it's been a part of my life, even now.
Very cool.
Yeah.
So I'm excited about this conversation because I do not have such a service engaged in my life. So I'm actively in the market and looking forward to our guest today. Question number 2. Has your conversation with your wealth management folks, has it changed since you've been out of the workforce?
It certainly kind of has for me, only because I'm at that stage now where I'm trying to spend it and or give it away. And my wealth management company that I work with, has set me up in a lot of different areas. And now I'm learning, the best way to spend it and to make sure that, I have enough, and to redirect some of it if I feel like and they give me options. They give me a lot of options. Hey, you could be doing this, could be doing this. We recommend this. Right now, the only big conversation changes. Okay, I think I'm going to live to 100. Do I have enough to live to 100? And they've been planning for me. I guess I've been with this company for 25 years. They know me. They know how I think, and they, change everything and kind of roll with making sure that I haven't, enough till I hit 100 or so or beyond.
Yeah. In my earlier years, it was a check the box. You're supposed to do this, right? You're supposed to put money away. And then when you have the meetings with the people, it's like, okay, when that time comes, things are going. It's all like sort of like a trend analysis. We're just looking at how are things generating, what are things doing. And it was nothing really in my mind to the point of actually being retired. It was, I'm doing this for later life, the nest egg, and, what's my number and all that kind of stuff. But it never really hit home until I got into the serious part of making that step away from career and jump into my next, I'm not going to say 30, next 20.
You're stepping
Come
away
on,
from
say it. Kurt, if anybody's going to make it to 30, it's you.
Well, yeah, I'm putting myself though at risk at times. But the point, the conversations now are a little bit more serious in the sense that I want to make sure that I have enough that's going to continue on, because I don't know how long I'm going to live, and I want to make sure that I do spend it, because that's another part that I have a real difficult time doing. And now the advisor role has turned to me not only in the aspect of accruing and building that nest egg, but now let's manage it. And I have to learn that, and I'm learning that now.
So speaking of manage it, Dale, why don't you tell us about our guest today?
Our guest of our Redirect podcast today is Anne Megerle. Annie serves as partner and private wealth manager at Creative Planning. She works with clients to develop and implement comprehensive financial plans to address their goals and most complex financial needs. Annie's approach focuses on really understanding her clients and what they want so she can help them achieve their dreams. Annie brings to our clients over 18 years of experience in the financial services industry. Prior to joining Creative Planning, she worked for an independent investment advisory firm as a wealth advisor and a member of the executive team. She also worked for Procter & Gamble directly out of school. Annie earned a Bachelor of Science degree in economics from Miami University. Annie is also a certified financial planner professional as designated by the Certified Financial Planner Board of Standards. Welcome to our podcast, Annie.
Thanks. I'm excited to be here today.
We are very, very honored to have you, so thank you for joining us.
So, Annie, we have an opportunity here that you've got two people, and Dale and myself, that have had this financial experience in the past with others. And we've got Adam here that...
I know, captive audience.
Very much so.
Fresh
very
meat.
Very much so. So I'm gonna sort of turn this over to Adam, because I think he needs to ask some questions, because do you have a piggy bank? How do you save your money?
Well, let's harken back to that one episode where I might still be paying for renter's insurance.
And that was just last week.
Right.
And you own a house, but that's a story. That's
right. For the record, it's not that bad. All right, but I do have some questions. First, let's get to know you. Tell us about what you do at Creative Planning.
Depends on the day. So a lot of it is I'm working with clients. I'm trying to understand what they need, what they want, and how to get them there. And so sometimes that's financial, sometimes that's not financial.
Interesting. How do you help them in non-financial ways?
When people work with a financial advisor, typically they don't have another person or a group of people they talk about with money. It's a really personal thing. And so when you start a relationship with somebody and you get to know them over a decade, 2 decades, they talk about things that they don't talk about with anybody else because they see you as a trusted advisor. And it's kind of mind-blowing, the conversations I've had with people, whether it's about their kids or their grandkids or a charity that means something to them. And as I said, usually the financial discussion comes into it, but it's not the main driver, right? There's usually a bigger issue that they're trying to solve, and the financial piece is a very small piece of what they're trying to do.
That's so interesting, because you think of those like social outlets for connectivity and problem solving: bartender, hairdresser, cab driver. Now it's apparently a financial wealth manager.
Exactly.
Confessional.
Right. Right.
I got to take up my bartending skills.
There you go. So, Creative Planning, what else do they offer? What's the full gambit of how they come to market?
So we do the wealth management, we do the investment services, We also have attorneys in-house. So we have 65 plus attorneys who do estate planning. We have 300 plus CPAs that do tax returns. We have a property and casualty group that helps people find property and casualty. We have business services. We help people get on Medicare. I mean, it's meant to be a full turnkey service. You know, some people come to me and just want wealth management, investment planning. That's my bread and butter. I do that all day long. But for somebody who's retiring and needs more, or somebody who's getting older, maybe they need bill pay, maybe they need corporate trustee, we have everything in-house. I worked for a smaller independent firm until 2020. And part of the reason we joined Creative Planning was we were looking at our client base and they needed different things than what we had in-house. So, you know, we had clients that needed bill pay. We had clients who, you know, their CPAs were retiring, their attorneys were retiring, and they were looking for kind of, hey, who's going to get me to the end of my life? And we looked at it as a way to restage the company and bring more in-house than what we had.
And if you already have a relationship with them, they trust you. They trust that you have their best interest in mind. They obviously appreciate the fee structure or whatever the relationship looks like from a profit standpoint for you. Adding those other services seems like a somewhat of an easy fit, right?
It was an easy fit. And I had a client probably 6 months ago, 12 months ago, reach out because they had cancer. And it came quickly. And he left this world quickly. And his daughters were out on the West Coast. And they were coming in because he was in and out of the hospital. His wife's legally blind, doesn't use a computer. And we were trying to figure out what we were going to do. And it was great because I had an estate planning attorney in-house who could update the documents and get them to the girls in 24 hours. We brought in bill pay to help pay the bills. You know, we moved the tax return in-house. So basically, we can put all the pieces together for the family, and it just takes a lot of the stress off.
We often talk about all of us having a 100-day plan. What would happen if something would happen? You know, and who would you turn to? And based on the story you just told me, if we were working together, I would be going to you, and you would be able to unleash all of the services that you have to help me through paying bills, getting everything in order, estates, but you're the primary contact, correct? I mean, or are you comfortable turning that relationship that you have with that person over to others in the firm and have them deal with the person one-on-one?
So the answer is both. So I would describe the role, I'm the single point of contact. I'm the quarterback. I'm the person who you're supposed to reach out to me, and I bring everybody else to you. So obviously, I know a lot about estate planning. I've worked with it for the last, almost 20 years of my career, but I'm not an estate planning attorney. I can't put together an estate plan, but I can connect you with the person who's going to do exactly what needs to get done and do it quickly so that you're set up for what needs to happen next.
I love this approach. I mean, I've never heard of a group that does the whole thing. It's a holistic view. And I think that's fantastic. I mean, I'm working with some people right now, but it's just, they help me with some of the thoughts that I have to have, but it's mostly financial development. And hearing the opportunity that there's sort of like a menu of services that I can come on in, and maybe I'm very happy with what I'm doing financially, but I want to talk more to you about estate planning because I got all kinds of questions about that kind of stuff.
I love this holistic approach. I mean, it's so bizarre for me to be thinking about the person that could come in let me be personal. If I lost my wife tomorrow, I'm up the creek. I think I'm up the creek. But if I know that I could call somebody and have them come in and work with me, and this is something I think all of us in our age group face, the reality of it's real, to be able to cover me financially, bill paying, probably somebody that knows me or can talk to me and just jump right in is
the idea of handing
a big comfort.
The idea of handing your spouse an easy button, right? Like, hey, you got one number to call Annie and tell them I've left. The aliens came and got me. I'm no longer with. The idea of being able to activate a whole bunch of tools to assist with what's next is really great.
That's a great topic, and I think we're going to get into that a little bit more during our conversation. But I want to get back to Adam here. All right, he's 54 years old. He uses a piggy bank. He still pays people that he doesn't need to pay.
Mattress.
Look at his backpack. There's dollar bills hanging out of his
coffee
backpack.
can in my backyard.
I don't know his company setup, if there's investments, 401k, and all that kind of stuff. But what advice would you give a guy that's 54 years old that's never really had a service like you to say, hey, not just all the things you just said, but it's like, get him to do something?
I look at it and go, a lot of people know how to save money, right? And maybe they don't need a financial advisor when they're at the beginning of their career and they're saving money. Maybe there's a 401k provider that can help with asset allocation. Maybe you have, really good piggy banks or a safe in the house and you're putting the spare change in. I have a client who did that. But I think the big thing is most people don't know how to spend money. But most people don't know how to spend money in a way where they feel like they're not running out of money. And we're also doing it in a way that's tax efficient, both from an income tax perspective and from an estate tax perspective. And it's hitting the buckets you want, whether it's the kids, the grandkids, or charity. And it makes sense to get a second point of view. The other thing I will tell you is most people oversave for retirement, or at least that's what I see. So people come in, they're really, really nervous. They don't think they have enough money. We build a balance sheet. Most of them are surprised at the number on the balance sheet. And then as we start to model through, reasonable market returns, very conservative assumptions, they're shocked at how much money's left over when they're gone. And I think that's the opportunity, right? Everybody is working harder than they need to. Maybe they're watching their kids, struggle to put kids through school or do a renovation, and everything just feels stressful. And I think there's another side of the story where you can look at it and go, hey, there's more here than I think there is. Leaving $5 million to my kids when they're 70 years old isn't the win here. What are we trying to do today for us as a family? Does working till 65 make sense? Should we stop at 60? Should we travel? Should we help the kids fund the grandkids' college? Those are all things that I think are huge opportunities that people miss because they're so down in the weeds.
And so what advice would you give me, or what
that was the original question.
No, that's okay. I appreciate the take on all of that. But what advice would you give me at 54? I'm knocking on your door.
Yeah, so at 54, I'd say, let's just start a conversation. Let's build a balance sheet. I'm going to have you pull your investment statements. I'm going to have you pull your 401k. I'm going to have you and your wife sit down. I'm assuming you're married.
I am.
Not. Okay. But we're going to basically sit down and we're going to build a financial plan. And we're going to show you where we are. So, hey, if you retired today, could you retire today? Are you on track to retire 6 years from now, 5 years from now? We're going to basically kind of give you hey, is everything you're doing working? I once had somebody use the analogy of, hey, this is like a cruise ship, right? If you're far enough out from port and you're off track, it's really easy to just very slowly move the steering wheel to get to the right spot. When you're getting closer and closer to the dock, you have to really course correct. And so what I would tell you is the earlier you look at it and go, hey, am I in a good spot or am I not? It's very easy to course correct.
So let's get into the aspect of dealing with clients that you work with. When does the reality of retirement sort of come in? Like I shared in my little story that, here I'm just building a number and I'm wanting my number to trend and all this stuff. When does that realization come on in as like, ooh, now I really got to think about what's coming up?
So average age is probably 55 to 60. But I will tell you, it's a big range. So one of my larger clients is actually retired in his 40s. So did very, very well for himself.
God bless him.
I know. I was going to say, does board work, volunteers, might work again. I don't know, but doesn't have to work again. And I think that gets into the freedom part of this, right? Where it's like, hey, he's achieved the financial freedom. Whether or not he works again, I don't know, but he doesn't have to. And then very recently I met with doctors who were late 60s who, could retire but didn't want to retire and loved what they were doing. And I think everybody finds retirement in a different way. I think most people are trained to think retirement's, 65 or 60, but that isn't always the story.
Could be younger, could be older.
And when they walk in and when you start the conversation, no matter where are they, what's their biggest fear? What is the big concern?
Most people are deathly afraid of running out of money, which I know is the shocker admission of today, right? Most people, that is the number one concern. And then I would also say probably a very close second is they're worried about whether their spouse or their kids can handle it when they're not there. So you guys kind of talked about it earlier, but we talk a lot about CFO spouse, non-CFO spouse. Typically there is somebody in the family who's running the finances, pays the bills, knows where to go find everything, and then there's the spouse that just doesn't. And part of our goal is to be there for the non-CFO spouse. It's to take all the financial stuff. We build what's called a dashboard. I'd consider it an executive summary of everything financial. So, hey, something happens, you get hit by a bus yesterday. What's your spouse going to come to? Hey, we have it all organized and ready to go, and we have the team in place to go help them do it. And I think that makes a big difference.
So as a trusted advisor, in the role of trusted advisor, you get to know all the finances, everything. Percentage-wise, I want to know this. What percentage of your conversation is non-financial?
That's a good question.
When that time hits,
So at the point where somebody, let's say they've passed, or let's say they've become incapacitated, it's probably 50% of the conversation's non-financial, because a lot of it is, or when I say non-financial, a lot of it's dealing with the emotions, dealing with the grief, dealing with family relationships, because it's complicated. And the financial stuff's important, but hopefully we've done so much of the financial work up front. It's really executing at that point. And again, we have the roles, we have the duties, everybody knows what they need to do. It's tedious, but we get it done.
I'm going to switch gears a little bit and ask the question in the sense that the Redirect podcast is all about finding purpose in retirement. Okay. Now, since you've talked about how you're sort of the trusted advisor, as Dale used that phrase, which I love, in that you're helping people in this journey, what do you see with people that have been working and then are still working, and then they're at this point where they just don't know what their purpose is now that they're done working? Have you ever dealt with things like that, and what advice do you give to them concerning purpose?
Absolutely.
We would ask that you recommend a podcast.
Yeah, and they can redirect their life.
Absolutely.
We have a list of 1,000 podcasts.
But there's really only one we recommend.
One that works.
There's only one that's a trusted advisor.
Love it. I think it's pretty common for people to not know what their purpose is during retirement. I think it's really common for most people to head towards retirement and they're doing what they think they need to do, right? They're going down the checklist of, hey, these are the things I'm supposed to do when I reach 60, 65. This is, I'm supposed to love golf. I'm supposed to love hanging out with my grandkids. I'm supposed to love hanging out on the beach. And that doesn't fill everybody up, right? It doesn't fill everybody's cup up. And so I had somebody retire a little over a decade ago, and I loved how he did it because he left a big corporate company. A lot of his friends were actually going into consulting. They formed a consulting company. And he said, no, thank you. I'm just going to sit tight for 12 months. And he let himself be bored. I think it scared his wife. But he basically took the time to go, hey, what do I want to do when I don't have to do anything? And he reset work-life balance in a way that I don't think I've seen anybody else do.
Wow. Because
most people jump into something. Maybe it's into a second job, but maybe it's also into, hey, I'm going to babysit my grandkids 5 days a week. It's like I'm going from one thing to the next. And he just took the time. And he did end up going back and working for the consulting company, but he had a different version of work-life balance than I've ever seen anybody else have.
Somewhat instantaneous via that reset, that pause in momentum, as my wife calls it. People build this professional activity, momentum, and then when there's somewhat of an instant descent that now I know I'm no longer clocking in. What am I going to do with my time? And I find myself with a ton of availability instantly, and momentum is a thing in that cognitively, I think. And so to that end of, having somebody like that as an example to pause, reset life balance, that's kind of brilliant. I'm taking note.
Well, and it's a true disruption, right? It's not just, to your point, of moving from one thing to the next thing and just not stopping. So,
I think since I'm right in the middle of my first year, I'm 7 months into redirection. I'm testing that. I mean, I really did try to walk away from what I'd been doing and had the opportunity to continue to stay in touch with what I was doing, but said it's probably better for me to completely reset, not do that, and get into other things that are totally not in that momentum of work that I'd been caught in for as long as I have.
How important, Dale, to you was, didn't you go through a semi-retirement thing where you were a couple, 3 days a week?
Yeah, I did.
Was that helpful in that transition?
Yes and no. Yes, I was unique in that what I was doing was 24/7. When you own a company and you sell it, you still feel like it's your baby. It was my baby, and I was I needed to leave my baby. I need to leave story building, which is this discipline of bringing stories to life in physical places. And that was my identity. And I went from 5 days to 3 days to 1 day, and because I knew that I had to pass this on, but I had to make that decision to say, I have got to throw myself into maybe realizing that I don't have my schedule full, and also not having it, and have the freedom to do what you want, and also to work through this idea that I'm now spending and not producing new income. That's probably one of the hardest things I've faced in the last 6 or 7 months, because we're so used to producing and bringing money and income in, and to have my financial advisor be able to say, look, you got to learn how to spend, because that's what you're going to be doing. You're on a fixed income now. Oh gosh, didn't know that. All of a sudden it's about the freedom to choose, but that's really hard in that momentum that your wife has talked about, and that's a big part of the transition.
We will rejoin our conversation in just a moment. Thank you for listening to the Redirect Podcast. We appreciate your support. Do you love what you're hearing? Don't keep it to yourself. Follow the Redirect Podcast on Apple Podcast and Spotify, and never miss an episode that inspires your next chapter in life's journey. While you're there, hit a 5-star rating, leave a review, and share your favorite episode with a friend who's ready for their own life pivot. And don't forget to join the conversation on Instagram at The Redirect Podcast. Comment, tag us, and let us know how you are redirecting your journey. Now let's get back to today's conversation. We talk about freedom a lot on here, and you mentioned it itself. Myself and my little journey, I love the freedom of just being away from the grind, right? I did take time to be fully engaged every day of the week because I needed to stay busy. I am very busy, but it's a choice. And it's, there's times where I'm up until 1 o'clock in the morning working on redirect stuff. My wife said to me, "You're working again." And I'm like, but I enjoy it. I really, really enjoy it. And it gives me purpose. And to your point, everybody's different. Everybody has different motivators. And it is something that I think you have to sit in it, and you have to recognize it and find out so your story that you talked about, that one gentleman just taking time, was really, really valuable.
Well, and what's so funny is I've had just a number of people who've left the big corporations, right? And they were taught that was what they were supposed to do. They were supposed to get a job with a company like P&G. They were supposed to work from 25 to 55, and then they were going to retire and play golf, right? That's the story.
Scaffolding.
Yeah. The Mike Fox episode, yeah.
And so when you go and you look at what their story ended up being, some of them left before 55. Some of them went on to other corporations. Some of them went on and created their own businesses. Some of them went on and did private equity. But I will tell you, a lot of the storyline is they were happier on the other side. Whether it was taking the pause or whether it was just they had more control of their schedule or what their purpose was going to be. But when I have somebody in front of me who's clearly in pain, and there's usually a telltale, right? Like maybe they have back pain, maybe they've been in the hospital, maybe they're,
Emotional distress.
Emotional distress, maybe they've gained some weight. But you look at it and you go, okay, something's not right with them. And it's like they go and they face their fear of, I'm going to call it the first retirement, right? They go and they face it. They go and they do it, and they realize that there is life on the other side, and those back problems that have been around for the last 5 years, all of a sudden they're gone, right? And it was all the stress they were holding in their body. And it's been amazing to watch those same people go on, and, a lot of them teach. As I said, some of them go create their own business. Some of them go into private equity. Maybe they're in board work or things like that, but they're lighter in their step, and it's really cool to watch.
And what role did you play in that?
So part of it is helping people understand that there is life after P&G or life after
Career.
J&J or life after some of the big corporations. Because again, a lot of people work at, and it's not like this today. A lot of people change jobs every couple of years now, but a lot of your generation worked at jobs for 30 years or 25 years. And it's such a mindset change to walk away from it. That's where their relationships are. That's where their purpose is built. That's where they know what they're supposed to do every day. And it's just such a mindset change to get to the other side. And a lot of it is what we talked about, Adam, which is it's stepping on the scale for the first time. That's how I would describe building a financial plan if you've never done it. Hey, where are we? Are we in a good place? Are we not in a good place? Let's say you retired today. Maybe you're not completely ready. Do you think you could earn $100,000 a year for the next 5 years? Great. You're on track. But a lot of people have in their mind that it's this big boulder they're trying to move. And it's not always as big as they think it is.
And they know, and let me ask you, do they realize it could be a work in progress?
It's funny you say that. I had somebody retire this summer, and I kept telling him stories. I was trying to introduce him to other people who had done it. And he was still really struggling with the idea that he was going to walk away from his pay, his stock options, his RSUs. And I talked to him a month later, and again, it was like he had to get through that mental block. And again, we ran the numbers and we ran the numbers and we ran the numbers, and he still was nervous. But it's almost like making the decision that creates the energy. I don't know that I answered your question.
Well,
That's insightful. Wait a second. Making the decision creates the energy.
Yeah.
I think that's useful. I mean, I think we've touched around that kind of stuff in previous episodes of, get moving, you can create momentum. That's insightful.
yeah, we talk about pick a date. I mean,
Yeah.
from the get-go, early days when we got together, you guys were looking at me going, pick a date.
Mr. Procrastinator
But
over there.
But that's a big deal for a lot of people who are in very long careers. Picking that date is, they've seen it happen in their company. They've watched others go through it. They're playing that out in their mind. That's a big deal, but it forces action.
Yeah.
It forces action.
One other little freedom I want to talk about. We've touched on money, we've touched on time, we've touched on purpose. Another freedom I want to talk about, and again, get your observation as I smile. What happens in the relationship aspect when you have a husband and wife come on and visit with you and they're talking about either one or both are retiring, and they look at one another and like, okay, now I'm with you 24/7. Well, now, do you then become a marriage counselor as a part of your services?
Unofficially, unlicensed.
Is there a whole department with you that you have that's just counseling?
Gets up and closes the door to her office.
So I've been called a therapist before, so I won't put that past it. But I call it the Venn diagram of marriage, right? Like, what do we like to do together? What do we like to do apart? And there's a calibration when you retire, right? Because when you're when you're working, chances are you don't have enough time together, right? You know, you're kind of stressed because, you know, you don't get to take the trips you want to, or you're not doing the things you want to during the week. And then all of a sudden you retire and you have so much time. And it's often too much time, right? So it's getting the right balance. And it's interesting because I had a couple, this was probably about 10 years ago. He had retired. They both had retired. They both had careers, and she was ready to go see the world, and he was still worried about whether they had enough money. And she looked at him and said, "You're either going to get on board or this marriage isn't going to work." And we did a lot of exercises with him to go, hey, this is okay. What she's telling you, you can go do, you can go do. And he's like a completely different person today, right? You know, and they have so much fun together because they take just incredible trips. And they've taken their resources and gone, okay, how do we help the kids? How are we funding 529s? But you have to get to the point where somebody feels comfortable. And it's funny because, Dale, you described it, you know, even if you've retired, people don't really feel the pinch until the income stops showing up. And then everybody kind of has that moment where they go, oh my God, am I going to be okay? And we have to help them kind of get off the ledge and go, it's going to be fine.
Have you ever recommended that people go get counseling?
Yes.
I think that's, as a trusted advisor, I would want to expect that, I think, out of you to say, look, this is something that's out of our realm, and we don't have a department that is, you know, counselors, but suggest that you go get some help.
As you find people who are, you know, they've picked a date, and that moment of picking a date is declared to you in your office, like, hey, January 1st of whatever year, we're doing it. Do you find yourself advising them like, hey, okay, get ready. Here's the next emotion you're going to experience. That tightening, that intensity and nervousness of no longer having income, or whatever else you might be red flagging them for.
Yeah, we typically try to do a lot more hand-holding when somebody's getting ready to retire. And we bring out a lot of tools that I don't bring out on a regular basis, but I bring out initially. Because a lot of people, and it sounds so silly, but it's like, okay, you've got money in the 401k, but people don't know how to pull it out, you know, or maybe we have money that's, you know, in a brokerage account and it's invested and they've never thought about, hey, how do we spend it? And so it's pretty common for me to build out, call it 5 or 10 years of income for clients where it's like, hey, let me help you understand. This is what we'd be pulling from the IRA. This is what we're pulling from the taxable account. Here's pension or stock option income. Here's Social Security. You know, here's what you told me you need. Here's exactly how we're going to go get it. And again, those are a little more art than science, right? Like sometimes opportunity changes and we'll switch it around a little bit. But it gives them a roadmap so they can go, okay, this feels more real than some of the kind of high-level retirement planning exercises.
Well, and that's you knowing that your that relationship that you have, and really knowing, understanding them. You're able to really dive in there if you have that relationship, right?
So it's funny. I tell people, particularly when I start with them, I work with engineers and I work with marketing guys. The level of detail that each group requires is really, really different, right? And part of what I need to do at the beginning is I need to figure out, hey, are you somebody who loves detail? Are you somebody who needs to tell me, or you need me to tell you it's just okay?
Yeah.
And
I need you to take this Myers-Briggs or whatever else disc assessment.
It's exactly right. It's like, what level of detail do you want? How often are we talking? Because again, some people look at me and go, you're like going to the dentist. Well, I don't want to do that to them more than they need to, right? But there are other people who want to be in my office quarterly, and again, you kind of meet the client where they need to be, and especially during retirement, because that same person may need to talk quarterly at the beginning, and then they may get more comfortable, and we get to, a frequency that better matches their life so that they can go live it and not worry about it.
So go about living life. Let's jump into the next thing that we talked about a little bit in the beginning of our podcast. That how do you deal with that life goes on aspect? That all of a sudden, what you've been planning for, and then what happens? As Dale made the example that something would happen in his life, and same with me. It's like, oh my gosh, I've lost my spouse. What do I do next? What are some of the big things there?
So I think a big thing that we work with clients on is financial succession planning. So again, there's a CFO spouse, there's a non-CFO spouse. How do we make sure that the non-CFO spouse is set up, has the right people around her, or him, if something happens. And I also think there's an element of doing the planning, So putting together a financial plan and balance sheet, having the estate planning done, and making sure everything's titled correctly. If you need life insurance, having life insurance. We all kind of hope and dream that we're going to live nice, long lives. But I had a situation a couple years ago where I lost a client at 59, and he was larger than life. Just everybody loved him. He had the biggest personality in the world, and it was devastating for the family. It was devastating for me to lose him. And I think the good news was we had done the work up front, right? We had all the estate planning done. We had the titling done. We had the pieces in place that needed to be there. And we were all dealing with this whole big bag of emotions. But we had a roadmap for what needed to happen. And I won't tell you that there's still not a hole in their lives, and there's not I would consider a hole in my life for not having him there. But to the same token, it's like life goes on, right? I mean, you got to go figure out what life looks like when you lose somebody, and the financial part can be such a small part if you do the work up front. I've seen other situations. I have one right now where she lost her husband in a house fire, and so not only does she not have her husband, she doesn't have all the things that she would have had. She didn't have a financial advisor. And we're kind of picking up the pieces from scratch. And I feel so bad for her and her family because they're mourning and they're grieving and they're dealing with all this technical financial stuff that needs to get done. And I think the biggest gift somebody can give their family is to do this work and do it up front and have it together so that they don't have to do this right now, right? It's like there's plenty of other things to worry about when somebody passes. Let's not worry about this.
You have to have the conversation.
Yes.
You have to talk to one another. I mean, we had an episode on where my sister-in-law, Gay Marie Guigeni, and her friend Sherry both lost their husbands. One person was buttoned up. Husband provided a list, even the simple things, the blocking and tackling. This is the bill. This is when it's paid. This is the account number, so on and so forth, that it's in a place where they have this conversation and they build this 100-day plan that you do in business. So should a CEO happen, pass away or leave a company, well, you got a 100-day plan in order to move forward. You need to do that in your own personal life in order to make that period of time less painful.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, don't add to the items that you have to grieve over and lament.
Yeah. I mean, and I learned a lot from working with people concerning this preparation when you made the comment about estate planning. Okay, I always heard the word estate planning, and I'm like, okay, I have to plan an estate. Well, I don't have an estate. I live in a house, and I have some money. Yeah, but what do I do with this estate planning thing? And it's the whole...
You need to check if your renting insurance is up to date.
That's right.
Yeah.
Check.
But it's the awareness to say that when that unfortunate time comes, you don't want everything that you've been doing held up in court forever. So you've got to plan accordingly to make sure that court systems don't get in the way of helping people in times when they need the help, right?
Well, and most people don't realize that if you have to go to probate, it's all public. So you look at it and you go, you have the option to do the work up front and everything kind of stays private. You don't have to deal with the court system, or you don't do anything and this, the state you live in gets to decide who inherits your money, and you have to go and everything's public and filed with the court system. So it's worth spending the time to go do it and do it right. And again, I've seen it done both ways, and it's a lot nicer when everything's nice and clean.
Yeah, when there's a bow on it, right?
When there's a bow on it. That's exactly it. Because as I said, there's still work to do. There's still going to be stuff that your spouse or your kids has to go do after the fact.
Yeah. So, Adam, you have any points? I mean, we brought up some great conversation here, and I hope that you've sort of learned some things.
I have lots of questions. I want to throw it back to you, Annie, to see if you have any closing remarks, anything you'd like to leave us with before we head to the house.
Absolutely. So I was in Kansas City this past weekend. We do our annual conference there. And our CEO has shown this quote before, and it still rings true to me every time I see it. And the quote is, "Time is the only currency you spend without knowing your balance. Spend it wisely." And so I think part of the reason that strikes me is I think everybody focuses on the wrong things, right? It's not the money. It's the, how do I spend my time? How do I spend my energy doing the right things so that I leave this earth and I've done everything I've wanted to? And the money's a portion of that, but the money's an enabler in it. And again, I think as we look at this conversation, this is important stuff, but this isn't the end all and be all.
I love that.
This is so good. How can somebody continue the conversation with you?
Absolutely. So you can come find me on the Creative Planning website, or you can email me. My email's Anne, ANNE, .Megerle, MEGERLE, at creativeplanning.com.
And the website is creativeplanning.com.
Creativeplanning.com.
Very cool.
Annie, I want to say thank you so much.
Really enlightening and insightful.
Thank you. I've really enjoyed spending time with you guys today.
And thanks for joining us on the Redirect Podcast.
We'd like to extend our heartfelt gratitude to the 1819 Innovation Lab at the University of Cincinnati for their incredible support and partnership making this show possible. If you enjoyed today's episode, you can find more of our content on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, as well as Instagram. Have questions or want to connect? Drop us a line at info@redirect-u.com. We'd love to hear from you. Remember, there's purpose in your life, so find it and go do something about it.